don't know if I really love this decision.
Over the middle, got his man, and look at him go! Jalen Waddle for the touchdown!
Welcome to Inside Leverage, your gateway to the fascinating realm of the Miami Dolphins. Join us as we delve deep into the team's dynamic Super Bowl journey. We invite you to share your most scorching takes, unwind, and relish in our captivating experience.
Tagovailoa, blocked by Armstead, going, he's got him! He's got him! Tyreek Hill! And the Dolphins have come back! A big play on the first one! Home run! Play one! To the house! What a start for the Dolphins!
It's Inside Leverage. We always gonna put on the show, baby. That's what we do.
Cody, thank you for joining us and giving us your time again this morning. It seems like you actually had perfect timing because, as you know, the defense is a hot topic of discussion right now for us.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, perfect time.
Yeah. Cody, if you could just introduce yourself one more time for the people who are unfamiliar with your work and let them know where they can find you and your work at.
Yeah, so I'm Cody Alexander. I run MatchQuarters. You can find MatchQuarters on you just type in MatchQuarters on any of the social media, and then also on I run a Substack. I talk about defense every week, try and drop a couple articles every week and just talk, keep you up to date on the trends that are going on defensively through the NFL and through the Power Five.
Appreciate you, Cody. Appreciate you. So, Cody, let me ask you, man, what's wrong with this defense right now, man? What are you seeing?
Well, this happens a lot of times when you get into a situation where you meet a team that has the perfect personnel for the issues that you have. You need to have a dominant defensive line, and then you need to have at least one corner that can lock down. I think the Bills, if you go back and you look at this and you watch through the rest of the year, some of the Bills receivers showed up that typically don't. Diggs went off. You're gonna have space. I think if you go look at the Eagles versus the Vikings, go look at what the Rams did to the Bengals. You still had Jamar Chase go off. You still had Justin Jefferson go off. What they were able to do in those situations was eliminate touchdowns. And I think that's where you're going to give up yards versus great receivers. But I think Josh Allen, the way he was playing because I watched the tape and the way that he was playing, they had one of their best games that they've had in a long, long time. And it just kind of was one of those. It was exacerbated by you don't have, Jalen Phillips didn't end up playing. You have problems with the secondary. I know when I was on here earlier, we had talked about what was one of the issues that I saw with this roster, and it was the nickel position. Well, now your nickel has to play outside corner. So again, and I think I mentioned this as well. Like, this isn't a situation like Madden where these guys have these numbers attached to them, and when you move a guy, he automatically he's an 85. He's really good. Oh, I'll move him outside. It doesn't necessarily work like that. These guys are working specialty positions. They're working situations. Their game plan is different. And I think for me, when you go and you look at it, it's one of those where I don't think it's the sky is falling. It does look really bad, especially after you just scored 70 points. But, I mean, look, it looks like the Broncos fixed Justin Fields. So it just goes to show you that on any given Sunday in the NFL, matchups matter, and I felt like they just didn't match up really well against the Bills last Sunday.
Cody, do you think maybe the Bills receivers is a size issue? Pause, like they're too big?
I don't necessarily think it has anything to do with size. I think that the way that they're built, those guys really have. Diggs, I think, can get lost in zone coverage. And so when you have a guy like that that's really good against zone coverage, he can find ways to sit down. I thought that the Bills did a really good job because their run game was acceptable. They still didn't rush for a lot, but their play action kept those linebackers close to the line of scrimmage. And that's when you were starting to see some of those routes in the middle of the field start opening up. You had some issues with penalties that got them into the red zone, and then they just were able to take advantage of some of the issues within the secondary for the Dolphins.
Cody, can I ask you this question? Once again, thank you for coming.
when we played them last year, it was a 3-point differential whether we won or lost. And all those games was with Connor Winters at center, Phillips playing. This year, we seen our line play great with Connor. The one time he doesn't go out, our offense is not looking like it does. And our secondary, like you said, was getting exposed because Deshaun Elliott, for me, I think he was a key part missing from that secondary because, like I was telling Chad, the host, in the first game, Holland and Elliott were the leading tacklers. He's the guy that cleans up what the front guys are missing. And we didn't have that. We had a lot of missed tackles, and I think the missed tackles just started leading to the downfall of the defense. And Phillips not being there, like you said, what do you think about Elliott and Phillips and Connor not being there, being a big factor? Because I think, to me, that was the factor to me, and the team not bringing no effort.
Yeah.
And his communication was severely missed.
I think this defense is safety heavy. Safeties get kind of the running backs they're kind of the running backs of defense. Like, it's like, oh, well, we'll just kind of sort through and we'll kind of go. I think that's changing. I think people are starting to realize, like, oh, safety play matters. I mean, go look at Atlanta with Bates. I mean, their defense is completely different this year just because they went out and they got a couple of guys that, especially in the secondary, that can do some things. I think when you in this defense, especially when you're trying to put it in, it's a slow burn. The Fangio defense is a little bit of a slow burn. It's going to take a little bit. It's front loaded on the teaching, so it's going to take a while. So when you lose a guy in the secondary that's making all the calls and he's cleaning it up, if you go back and you look at even like when the Rams, when they were going through their Super Bowl run, when they were having issues on defense, it was because the safeties weren't making tackles at the second level. And that, to me, is kind of what happens in the Fangio system, is when you do get in situations where you're missing a safety or your safeties just are not making the play on the tackle because everything is kind of fit off of that and they're kind of the stop gaps like you guys were alluding to. When that doesn't show up, that's when you can get into some trouble with this defense, and that's when you end up getting some of these explosions. I still thought the run defense was okay, but in the secondary, there were just too many big plays given up, and that usually goes back to, was the call, where's the safeties at, what was the call, are we communicating correctly, are we making sure that we're in the right spots, that we're shading the correct receiver, and all of those pieces are fitting together, especially within the system.
Right, and it just, to me, the defense overall has just been kind of up and down. They've had some good performances coverage wise. Last week, I guess, wasn't one of them, but overall, the defense hasn't been as bad as people are making it out to be. But I do think there's been a lot of missed assignments and bad decision making by the linebackers. It seems like they're not really playing well off of each other right now. You have one guy who's shooting the gaps and the other guy who's just way too hesitant and just kind of getting washed out of plays and unable to fight off blocks. What are you seeing from the linebackers, and what do you think that this defense can improve going forward? Like, what do you think needs to be tightened up?
Well, I think you look at a situation, a guy like Baker, who has been in a single gap fit. I know where I'm supposed to go. It's a blitz heavy. He's usually working towards the line of scrimmage, or he's playing man coverage on a running back. So it makes your job really easy. Now it's more of a ball fit system. They're trying to make things muddy with the offensive line. They're trying to keep the offensive line off the second level. I have to read a back. I have to read a guard pull. There were a few times where, the defensive, his anchor point crosses his face, and yet he still tries to cross the face of the guy blocking him instead of holding the gap that just was created. Instead of seeing, okay, my primary gap has been taken up by the presence of the defensive line, which the interior guys are supposed to do that. I need to bounce back. I call it a belly key. You can call it a fallback fit. I need to fall back into the open gap instead of trying to fight that guy and keep in my head in my gap. I think too with David Long is that he should work in this system really well, but he's still coming from a different system, coming from the Titan system into a Fangio system. Those linebackers need to be more or less patient. They need to be able to read and react. They need to kind of be a little bit more lateral in their movement and not necessarily downhill, where, again, you flip philosophies from a very much of a downhill. I mean, go look at what the Vikings are trying to do. They're just trying to blitz blitz through everything. It's like blitz through it. But whereas the Fangio system is more or less, we're going to bend and don't break, get you into red zone. And then we're going to make sure that you don't score touchdowns where, that just didn't happen against the Bills. I think you're going to look back at this game. There are going to be a ton of teachable moments. I always, when I would coach and I was talking to my kids, it's like, you learn, you don't lose. Don't make this a loss, make this a learning. I think going through, especially this or first quarter of the season, that is, to me, there is going to be a lot of teach tape off of this, of what not to do or why we want to do this and where your eyes need to be, where your leverage needs to be off of this tape.
Right. Cody, overall, right? Like, I just was wondering, is there a scenario in which Fangio decides to maybe start doing what these guys are a little bit more comfortable with, like with Jerome Baker, for instance, allowing him to single gap more and just kind of play faster, blitzing him more? And is there a scenario in which maybe he starts adapting some of the things that were done well by these guys during that Flores era and kind of incorporate it a little bit more into his defense to make things a little easier for these guys? Or do you think it's a situation in which you're just going to really have to learn his system?
Yeah, I do think that the blitz rate probably needs to come up. I do think that you're having problems. I mean, if you look at it, like Chubb has 1 sack. You got to get that number up. You need him to really step up and start showing up. And I think that there's different ways that you can manufacture that. Again, I think Wilkins only has 1 sack. So it's like, we've got to find ways, especially with the inside, to get those guys. That you're going to do that by doing more 5-man pressures, getting one-on-one blocks. I think I said this like when I talked to you last time, like Long at the Titans was like their main blitzing linebacker. So finding ways that you do that. And normally when you're going to blitz somebody, that's where you kind of get into those. It's a lot easier to fit that off. So I think PFF has their blitz rate at 22% right now, which to me is a little bit low for what when you're trying to maybe manufacture some pressure. I think that is something that going forward, Fangio, and he has shown that he's willing to do some more blitzes and really lean into that. And I think that might be something that you see going forward is a little bit more of a design blitzes.
Right, because with Flores, like you said, he's kind of one of those guys that just likes to blitz through everything, and we have a lot of great blitzing personnel, whether it be David Long, Baker, even Brandon Jones, who in my mind is probably one of the best blitzing DBs in the NFL.
Yeah, they got to use Jones.
Yeah, Bethel's shown the ability to blitz at a high level this year. Kohu, when in the slot, he's shown the ability to come off the edge really strong. Holland, like, I just wonder if there will be opportunities to get more aggressive, because to me it just seems like we're kind of, especially against these Herbert and Allen, to me it seems like they were just sitting back a little bit too much and not coming after them.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, and I get why Allen can be an issue if you really go into a game worried about his legs and you're sitting there thinking, okay, if we blitz him heavily, we're going to get into some trouble. Then you become more passive. I mean, on the year, through the first 4 games, the Dolphins have about a 30% blitz rate. They had, like I said, they had 22 against the Bills. They basically just played sit back and play defense. And I think with that, you've got to really be careful. And that's probably one of those things that you'll see differently when you see them play the Dolphins later in the year is, are they going to add a little bit more pressure? How can we kind of get into, even if it's just bringing simulated pressures where we're bringing 4, and we're dropping a guy out, and just that perceived pressure, keeping the back in. How can we do that? I think to me, going forward, using guys, it takes some time to learn what your guys can do and what your guys can't do. And I think going forward, again, I think this game, we're going to look back at this game and see, okay, this was more or less a teachable moment for a lot of things. As we go forward, the defense will be a little bit, he kind of has an idea of like, okay, this is who we are. This is what we can't do if we want to win this division.
So, I mean, one thing I've learned through this Mike McDaniel era is I kind of picked this up from Mike, is like, good or bad, like if it's good, then you have things that you can reinforce. And if it's bad, then it just allows you to be able to correct some things. And I just wonder, for me, like, is the things that have worked well this season? Are there enough things that we can build on to reinforce? Because it just seems like right now, it's just real inconsistent, especially up front in the linebacking core. And then last week we saw with the secondary without Phillips and Deshaun Elliott there, how that looked. I just really wonder, Cody, like how quickly we can make this turnaround with everything we have going on. How long does it typically take for Fangio's defenses to get going throughout the course of the season? Is this something where we maybe have to wait up until the bye week to kind of see what this team's really going to be defensively?
Yeah, I think that's probably when you have a kind of it's a coverage heavy scheme. There's a lot of different moving parts within it. There's a lot of checks within it. There's a lot of reads within it. Guys need to know what everybody else is doing. I think that you're going to have games like this where it just kind of looks like, oh, okay, we didn't really do great. We need to fix. I think you're going to go on a stretch here before the bye week. You're going to get 2 weeks where I think against the Giants in Carolina that you can really make sure that you get things solidified before you go and you play Philadelphia. You get New England, who's offensively not real great. And then that kind of is, let's go see where we are against Kansas City. And I think that's the game that's the game in Germany. So it's going to be almost like you're not going to Arrowhead. You're not going anywhere. Okay, let's see where we are going into the bye week. And then again, out of the bye week, you really have some time. So that's why long story short, the sky's not falling. There's going to be time to get this defense fixed. I do believe in Fangio. I think what this is, there's a reason why he's there. I just think that it does take time when you have a check heavy defense like this, a rotation heavy defense like this, and you are going to get, I call it like mitigating defense. You're trying to mitigate as much risk as you possibly can. You're trying to eliminate as much risk as you possibly can. When you play defense like that, you're going to run into situations where okay, crap, we didn't stop anything this week and it looked really bad. And that's just it. It just ended up having to be against a divisional rival in the Bills. Hello?
Lost you guys for a second just there. I don't know what just happened with Twitter. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Yeah. But yeah. So last week, let me ask you this. The big thing for the big story was Xavier Howard asking to cover Diggs, and Fangio didn't let him. Why do you think he didn't allow Xavier Howard the matchup that he wanted against Diggs? Why do you think that was?
He must not. I mean, for a coach not to do that, he must feel like he must have just felt like it wasn't that much of a matchup, that he wasn't going to get much out of that matchup. I'm a Baylor guy. I was at Baylor with when Xavier was there. I was a GA when he was there. I've watched his career. I think him coming off of the knee injury, he's not the same player that he was 3 years ago. And I think with that, you have a guy that's burning hot in Diggs. They're not playing a lot of man coverage to begin with. I do think that you can have him on top of him. And two, it could have just been that it was one of those days where it was like, look, man, we're already getting beat. I want to see what this kid can do. We've got, it's not going to, me moving you over there is not going to change anything in the game. And I know that that's probably hard to hear as like a fan, like, well, why wouldn't you do that? But at the end of the day, you go and you look at that game and it was like, me moving you over isn't going to necessarily help anything. I need to know what we have going forward and what this looks like going forward. So, it's 34-14, 31-14 at halftime. You moving him over there might not necessarily change anything. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know that's difficult. I'm putting the coach hat on. I'm putting the coach hat on for this because I'm with you too. Why would you not take your best cover corner and just put them on their best guy? But at the end of the day, remember, this is an 18-week season. You've got to know who you've got going forward. You don't know necessarily, when Jalen Ramsey's going to come back and what he's going to be when he comes back. So it's like you've got to kind of figure out what you have in these younger players and what they can do, and be able to put things on tape going forward. You got to think of this remember, the NFL season is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And yes, that is a tough pill to swallow. I know that. Yeah, but
bro.
but when it's
Sorry, go ahead.
31, when it's 31 at halftime, and you get your guy coming and saying, "Hey, put me over there," it's like, yeah, I get that, but like at the same time, it doesn't necessarily matter. I do think that maybe you could have put him. Most of Diggs' stuff came on the defensive right. Maybe you just move him over to the defensive right and just keep him there. Maybe that's what you do. But sometimes you just got to live through stuff, and I think that's probably what more was. You're trying not to kill this kid's confidence that you're going to have throughout the year. But I do think that the Bills definitely picked on him. That was one of the things that, just watching it on TV. I watched it on TV. Watching that on TV, that was definitely something that you could see that was happening.
Go ahead, Reggie.
Morning, Cody. Morning. How you
Doing
doing,
good.
bud? Oh, great. As we all saw, Eli Apple sat down this past game, right? Do you see the role changing a little bit more, like getting him back on? Because I'm more on the end of view, like I have the same sentiments as you, as it was already at a point where, I'm not going to dial up a whole bunch of things, but as far as blitz packages and this and that, you don't have your main personnel out there as well. You don't want to. I feel that's kind of what happened last year with Boyer, where you felt so, you're so badly hurt that the last thing you have to do is use your weapons, which is your blitz packages and stuff, to the point where it was on every down. And I feel that's what Fangio avoided. You know what I mean? Showing his hand. Basically showing his hand.
Yeah, and that's part of the problem. Like this, we saw this. Go watch the Vikings defense last year and what the Fangio system looks like when you basically just run static fronts and static coverages. In your secondary, you don't have corners. You don't have corners that that you really trust in coverage, or even know how to play the coverages. I do see that maybe Eli Apple comes in and has a little bit more of a role, just because he is a veteran. He's been around. He can kind of hold up. Maybe you kind of move Kohu back to the nickel. But the problem you get when you start moving parts is that
I can't hear it. Chat, bring me back.
The problem that you get when you start doing a lot of moving parts like that is that you're kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul if you move many guys all at once.
I got you. Which is 100% true. Because the way I was thinking, I was like, both the nickel and the boundary opposite of Xavier, that's where they hit the most. That's exactly where they attack. Everywhere except for Xavier. That's why, to me, moving Xavier wouldn't have helped at all, to be honest. So, yeah, you could remember they scored on Bethel, on a little wheel route, to the end zone. So those simple things that we thought that we had, good coverage on and stuff like that, that is a thing that actually made our boat sink quicker. You know what I mean? So I didn't feel like moving Xavier was gonna help at all. I know everybody may think differently, but that's kind of the game of football. I'm gonna take away his best side, his right side, the quarterback's right side, and that's where I'm gonna keep Xavier, and I'm gonna avoid him throwing to that side as much as possible. Not to say that he's not, but I'm gonna try as much as possible by just keeping Xavier in one spot. But other than that, yeah, I have the same sentiments as you. I don't think moving around would have been done too much.
I just wonder why we haven't seen Cam Smith. Like, do you think with the next couple of weeks we're going up against Daniel Jones and Bryce Young, and these aren't necessarily like high-powered passing offenses, that there could be some opportunities to maybe get him involved and get him some reps?
Yeah, I could see him getting a little bit more PT in the next couple of weeks. I think here's the other thing too. Coaches are not going to play people that they don't trust, and it could just be one of those. Cam Smith's coming from South Carolina, which is a very press heavy, very man heavy system for those outside receivers. And so when you go into a Fangio scheme that plays a little bit more off ball corner, a lot more zone, there's a lot of eyes, there's a lot of reading. That's where you see a lot of problems. I mean, again, I go back to the Vikings because that's just, that's kind of they kind of are the exemplar for all the bad things that can happen. You have two corners for the Vikings last year that were very press heavy in college. They're young. They haven't played a lot of zone. You saw it with the Texans with Stingley, really struggled at the beginning of the season to really kind of understand how to read and cover two. Eyes are, where do I break on this? Do I sync with this? When do I come off? When do I don't come off? And I think for a guy like that, you're going to slowly get him involved because you don't want to get him burned early early. You don't want to get burned early. Now you're going through probably a series of games where you can start kind of putting him in there, kind of moving him around and letting see what you got with him as well.
Right. Appreciate you, Cody, coming through and giving us your time. Do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah,
How much time do we have?
I can do a couple more questions.
And all right, I wanted to ask you on that personal on that PI on Kohu, the one that was 40 yards down the field to Stephon Diggs. Do you know which one I'm referring to?
Yes, I know what you're talking about.
What are your thoughts on that? I thought there was a little bit of hand fighting there, but like honestly, I didn't see a lot of contact at all, especially on the all 22. When I saw it on the all 22, I was pissed. And I was like, "Yo, it really looks bad." Like, what were your thoughts overall on that penalty? What do you think that Kohu? I know he could have got his head around. I think that probably would have avoided it if he would have just turned his head a bit. But what were your thoughts on that penalty?
Typically, if you see a PI and you are like, I don't understand. If the DB, you kind of said it. If the DB does not play the ball and they perceive that there is contact, that will be a PI almost every single time. That's one of those things that when you teach DBs and you're going through it with your DBs and you're talking to them about, defending is like there's two ways that you can quickly get a penalty, and that's arm bars, because arm bars essentially means you're grabbing the guy and then not getting the head around. The PI on this play in particular, I'm with you. I didn't see anything that necessarily made it PI. I think it was he saw that the head didn't get back and he just threw the flag. I think half the time that doesn't even get called, because he has good. I'm looking at it right now. He has good position on it. He's chest to chest. Diggs pushes off to create space, and he throws his hand through his hands and gets the pass breakup. I didn't really see any grabbing early, because otherwise the flag would have come out earlier. It's just
right. I didn't see anything there. I was livid. I was watching. I was so mad. Bro, I know you're on the road. You're in enemy territory. You're not going to get all the favorable calls, but that one was just really tough, man. And that was a big call.
Yes, huge call.
Yeah, 100%
it's on the Dolphin
right.
sideline too, which makes it even worse. Yeah, that's just a heartbreaker right there, because he's in good position. He's running right by him. He throws his hand right when he does. And again, the NFL is weird with PI calls. And it's almost as though if you don't try and play the ball when you get chest to chest with the receiver, you're going to get some sort of a PI. And that's kind of what I've noticed.
That's a tough one. That was a tough one, man. When I saw that, oh, man, I can't believe they called that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I think the best fighting.
Cody, a quick question. People on the inside or back channels, however you want to say it, are saying that they think Raekwon has been playing well this year. I don't see what they're seeing. Do you think he has?
Looking at the run defense, you need a big space here. It's so hard in this system to really know if your nose tackle is doing well unless you look at kind of the run numbers for the year, inside run numbers, because you're not going to get a lot of pressures. You're not going to, Wilkins is the guy that's going to be the 3 technique. They're going to try and get him the pressures. He's kind of like the Aaron Donald. It's just hard to tell. That guy's really a workhorse. So if you're not hearing his name a lot, that's probably a good thing. It's probably better than not. But just, it's so, again, I would have to watch film and really watch him to see if he's just getting blown up or not.
Yeah, a lot of us were expecting Wilkins and Sealer and some of these guys to, Jalen Phillips, of Chubb coming back to his old scheme. We're expecting all these guys to be a lot better than they've shown, and I really can't wrap my mind around what I'm exactly seeing. I've seen a lot of times where when we're coming out in 4-man, teams are just double teaming the 2 interior guys, and there's like a huge void in the middle, and then we have our linebackers who aren't filling properly, and it's just. I just don't know what we can do about that outside of those guys just having to beat those double teams.
I think Fangio's interesting. He's not a big penny front guy. So like when typically you watch like the Broncos last year or the Rams, they have a lot of 5-man fronts. he's not really ever been a big 5-man front guy. I do think though you could start seeing more and more of that to create these one-on-one blocking situations. And maybe that's something that you can do going forward for him. Hey, let's get into some more of these 5-1 penny fronts. That might be what more personnel that might fit the personnel a little bit better than what we have. Because if you really go look at the teams that run, a lot of 4-man fronts, they have huge space eaters at tackle, and like the Jets are a great example of that. They're able to get away with a lot of stuff in a 4-down because they have 2 big guys inside. I know the Commanders did last year. Obviously, this year that defense doesn't look the same. But you go and you look at some of these teams. The Titans are a great example of another team that can run a 4-down front primarily because of the inside guys. Saints are another one. 49ers, go look at their interior guys. So if you're having trouble inside, sometimes the best thing that you can do is go into that 5-man front and create one-on-one blocking. And so that now you've got guys like Seller who is now a one-on-one. Wilkins is now one-on-one. Now we've got Chubb and Phillips and Van Ginkel in one-on-one situations with tackles. And so maybe that's something to look into as we go forward into the season.
Cody, I want to thank you again for your time. Do you have time for a couple more questions before we go?
Yeah, that's fine. I can do a couple more. I'm not in a rush.
I think Junior had a question for him.
Junior. Yeah. Go ahead, Junior. And if Z-Man, if you have a question for him, feel free to jump in after Junior.
Hey guys, what's going on? Hey Cody, thank you for coming through once again. I do have a question in terms of the D-line. I don't know if you answered the question. I just got here, but it seems with Christian Wilkins and Sealer, they're not as effective as I would like them to be, unless you disagree in general. What are your thoughts of what you've seen? I don't know if you watched the first 3-4 games. What are your thoughts on the interior guys? And if you could remind us what are their responsibilities so we can have a better understanding of what they're supposed to do. Thank you.
Yeah, so I just got done saying probably to look for maybe more of an evolution back into like a 5-man front, their penny stuff, which is their 5-man front with a single back. That way you can keep your nickel personnel out there. Really, the job for the nose is to just be a space eater and to really dominate. I thought in this system, you really want to have a pass rushing tackle, which you have in Wilkins, and then kind of a space eater, which, that's what they really want Davis to be, is just kind of a space eater, take up double teams, let the 3 technique be able to get one-on-ones. And then you have a guy like Seller, who's a 300-pound guy. He can play some 5 technique. He can work inside. That's why I think when you look at it, the rotational pieces inside, you want to be able to be a space eater inside, but then you want your 3 techniques or your 4 eyes to really be able to win those one-on-ones. And that's why I think if you're having trouble with your 4-down front and you're kind of getting gashed and you're having problems with defeating those double teams, that's when you might pivot to a penny front and getting more to the 5-1 stuff. So that would be something that I would look for a trade. That's what I mean. That's a kind of a trend going forward. Maybe more penny front stuff from the inside guys.
Oh, if I may, last question. What do you think about our linebackers so far? It seems like they're out of sync, a lot of hesitation on one end, and then you got a guy that's kind of anticipating wrong, or is quick to jump a gap, but goes to the wrong gap. What are your thoughts on the linebackers so far?
Yeah, so I hit on this like right at the very beginning. Was like you've got a guy like,
my bad.
No, but you're fine. But just to kind of rehash, like Jerome Baker is coming from a single gap system that he's been in his entire career. All of a sudden now he's got to be more of a read, a ball fit guy. Let the anchor points kind of figure out where they're supposed to go, and then I'm going to fit off of that wherever the back goes. When you single gap fit in a kind of a fallback mentality or a gap and a half mentality like the Fangio guys do, is that my gap may change. I need to play more lateral than I need to play more downhill. It's a completely different system of things. And so then you have, again, with David Long, he's coming from a more of a different system. He was kind of the blitzer for the Titans. And so kind of that read and react for some guys might be a little bit different. It's easy when I have one gap and one responsibility. And then when I go into a situation where now I've got to read and feel out, I'm more lateral, I'm more passive, that can not everybody fits the scheme. And I think that that's what we're finding out this year. And that's why you're going to see inconsistencies week to week, is that Fangio is figuring out what personnel he really has outside of the guys that he knows personally. What can we do? What can we not do? What are my guys good at within our base scheme? What are calls that I need to call more? What are calls that we need to kind of keep in our back pocket for later on down the road?
Facts. Appreciate you guys for making the space.
No problem.
Do you think it's a guy that they can get by the trade deadline to make a drastic change on the defense, or it's just going to be, this is how it's going to be, them figuring it out, and Fangio gets his type of guys next year in the offseason?
Yeah.
Because everybody's saying, make a trade, go get somebody. Who? And if you think there's a guy who, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I think you're right. Because, okay, let's trade for a corner. Okay, well, what do we do when we get Jalen Ramsey back? Okay, now we've got these corners. I mean, maybe you can go for a one-hit wonder, corner just to kind of clean that up. The problem again with that is it's got to be a guy coming from that system. Okay, let's go get a safety. Okay, well, that you have a good core of safeties. Do you want to necessarily, who are you going to get? Because that's the thing is, if you bring somebody in, who are you going to get rid of?
I got a couple names for safety. I'd love to go after Buda Baker or maybe Simmons.
Yeah, now I could see. I was going to say that, and I'm glad you brought that up. If you're going to go after anybody, I think you go after Simmons. I think that would clean up a lot of the things in your secondary. I think you bring in Buda Baker, you're gonna be kind of in the same situation that you are with everybody else, is that everybody else is kind of trying to figure everything out. So I do think that a guy like Simmons, if you want to go and get that, maybe you go and get that. I don't necessarily think you could always add another edge just to keep the rotation. I feel like edges and corners, you just kind of collect as many as you possibly can. But in terms of like a big blockbuster trade, the Simmons trade would be the one that, if you can get the Broncos to bite on that might be the one that you want to do.
What about trading with a team we just traded with? An hour ago? Eddie Jackson from the Bears.
Yeah, he
is hurt.
You want to look at guys. You do want to look at guys. You do want to look at guys that have Fangio ties. That would make sense. I do think, though, if you're going to go for the home run, the Simmons one would be that would be the one, because now you have a bona fide All Pro that you know in this system is really, really good.
Right, that's the one. No, go ahead, good thing, man. My bad. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say it also frees you up to kind of, we were talking about maybe using three safeties. It gives you that freedom to maybe insert Elliott into the box, or maybe a Javon Holland into the box, because now at least all three of your safeties can cover, so you can give yourself a little flexibility with not having to use all these not really the best linebackers.
Yeah, I mean, that's what if you go and look what the Patriots are trying to do on defense, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to fix their problems with a five-man front, and then we're just going to use all of our safeties to kind of pick and choose the matchup each week, and we're going to change each week. I think that would be something that you could definitely do. Maybe move one of those guys kind of into more of a big nickel position that's more of a coverage guy. Maybe be able to play a little bit more zone, because they're so zone heavy anyway. You're not necessarily trying to play man, so you don't need a third corner necessarily. You need a guy that can hold up in coverage, but at the same time, he's a blitzer. He's a guy that can play near the box, and that to me is when you can get more versatility in your safety positions. It can kind of fix some things that the Dolphins are having problems with right now.
What's your thought on like a Patrick Queen, or in trying to go for like a linebacker set?
Well, again, it goes back. If you're going to go get a guy, you brought David Long in, you signed him as a free agent. So you're probably going to, are you going to get rid of Jerome Baker, or are you going to move Jerome Baker down the list? Because if you pick somebody up, you got to get rid of another guy. So maybe you do get a dynamic guy in the middle. I think that's one of the things, that's one of the knocks on this system, is that it's not linebacker centric. And so you don't necessarily, I don't know if Fangio's necessarily looking for kind of a home run hitter at linebacker. He needs more kind of workhorse guys at that position. And really you need a boundary corner and two safeties that can really play football.
I heard people's feelings here, Cody, because everybody wants the Dolphins to go get this flashing linebacker like it's just out there. They think it's out there.
Go and look at Fangio's defenses at Chicago and at Denver, when they just do not go after big linebackers. They want edges and they want defensive backs. It's not a linebacker. This is not a linebacker heavy system. And I think that you would be putting a position, you would be getting a guy at a position that you're already, that they've got four guys and that's what they're going to carry. So if you get him, you're going to have to get rid of somebody.
Yeah, we already
was
have
Khalil Mack
Jerome.
in Chicago when Fangio was there?
Who?
Cody?
Yeah, it was he had Raekwon. Pretty sure.
Yeah, they drafted him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know he drafted Waco. I'm saying Khalil Mack.
Yeah, well, again, that's
an
edge. That's an edge defender that, you go looking back at that. Yeah, that's an edge defender. That's a guy, again, that's an edge. You not linebacker centric.
No, I was trying to see if Fangio was the one that scouted him or drafted him, or did they miss each other? I was just trying to see. That's all.
I got you.
Cody, by any means, in the past regimes under Fangio, have you ever experienced or know of a time where the linebacker either was substituted with the safety or whatnot? If you understand, like instead of like bring down a box safety instead of a linebacker, has there been a situation where he adjusted like that?
Yeah, so that's where the penny front comes in. Again, he traditionally has not been. He was in Chicago. He played it a lot more than he did at Denver. And again, it comes down to personnel. Staley is really the guy that played more of the penny front, especially with the Rams, because you want to get Aaron Donald a one-on-one block all the time.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
I just wonder if going forward they'll allow these guys to do more stunts and twists, because I'm not seeing any of that. Is that something that we'll see in this system, Cody?
Yeah, I think that's it. It's not a blitz heavy, stunt heavy system. I do think though that you could end up seeing more of the movement stuff. You got to be careful with some of these that sometimes if you move too much, then you can open up gaps. Guys aren't necessarily in where they're supposed to be. But you could, the Dolphins right now are in the lower third in stunts. You could see that go up. I think what you're going to see more is more blitzes, more 5-man fronts, trying to manufacture one-on-ones for your guys that can win.
I just don't see Chubb given like unique opportunities to rush enough. Like I feel like it's either like he's either rushing directly like off the edge, or they're dropping him back in coverage, which they did that a lot last game, which kind of made me what was that about? Like I didn't like that. Did you notice? Well, what did you see with Chubb?
Yeah, it's really interesting because that's kind of if you're going to have a complaint on Fangio, that's kind of been the creativity of packaging guys. Like I thought last year at the Broncos, watching the Broncos before and then watching the Broncos with Evero, it was like two different teams, even though it was the same scheme. You get guys moved around. I thought Staley did a good job, did a good job with the Rams moving around. I think Raheem Morris does a good job within the system of moving Aaron Donald around. Maybe that's something that Fangio needs to look into, is like getting him in different positions to where it's, or moving him around and not being so static with alignments. And I think that's a valid argument and that's a valid question, especially in this system, especially from, traditionally watching this, that it's guys line up where they're supposed to be. He's kind of the guy that, famously would drop Von Miller into coverage, which is like, why would you drop Von Miller into coverage? So that's a valid question. That's a valid complaint.
Right. I feel like he's such a smart and well-established coach that I just wonder if he's just, how do I say this? I mean, I guess I'll just say stubborn and thinking that his way works and that his system's going to work. And I don't really know how much he's willing to change or adapt. He said that he would when he got here, that he would build it towards his personnel. And if he needed to blitz more, he would. Like he's already kind of addressed a lot of these things, but I'm not seeing it on the field. So a lot of us are like wondering, is this just like a part of his process? And I mean, you kind of alluded to that earlier, where it being just kind of more of a marathon and he's just trying to figure out what he has and what he can and can't do, and just allowing him to build on, his play calls and what calls he needs to take out based on their performance in those situations. And I just wonder if is there gonna be any adjustments or are any significant adjustments, or would it just be more minor tweaks going forward?
I think you're going to see minor tweaks going forward. I think he's going to evolve into it. He has shown, I will say this. I mean, it's not like he's just like a guy that's like, this is what I do. He has changed language within his scheme everywhere he's been. He's a guy that if you get a playbook from 10 years ago, it won't look like it does today. It wouldn't look like it did 5 years ago, where he's changed languages. He's done different things. He's blitzed more. He's pressed more. He's shown a tendency to do that. And I think that, it's the first quarter of the season. You've had an offense that is just absolutely murdering people all the way up until this week. So as a defensive coach, it's like, I don't want to mess this up. So I'm going to run kind of our basic stuff, get real good at it. And then if we need to adjust later on, we can, hopefully. And like I said, this is probably a learning experience. This is probably a good thing. And I know that that's hard because you just lost, especially to a division opponent, but this is probably more of a good thing than it is a bad thing, of like, okay, we probably need to do a little bit more things. We need to look into maybe moving some guys around. And now you have 2 weeks to really do that until you play the Eagles, which will be a good litmus test for a team that maybe potentially you see if you make it to the Super Bowl.
What are your thoughts overall on these big regular season games and it being a litmus test for, because you kind of just alluded to that. A lot of people have been making the arguments that by us not beating Buffalo, that it just kind of proves that we're not ready and we're not who we thought we were and all that. And to me, it just seems like a bit of an overreaction. I mean, what are your thoughts overall on just us, like these big regular season games and the importance of them to your season? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Like, could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think these are all. I think with the Bills, you have with them too. They've kind of went through their ugly loss early, and they did it in week 1, and they've been kind of, and then they've kind of been on their game since then. The Dolphins haven't had any adversity this year to this point. And so to me, again, it's a marathon, not a sprint to these NFL seasons. You're going to have losses. You're going to have bad losses. You're going to have, head scratchers where you're like, what just happened? And then the next week you look like world beaters again. So I also think that there is a tendency when you have a game like the game you had against the Broncos, where every single thing goes correctly, that you kind of have a drag the next week. And when you do that against the Bills, who have been to the AFC Championship, several years in a row, a lot of people think that they're a Super Bowl contender. You go up against a good team who's already kind of had their early bad loss. That's a recipe for disaster. And I think that's exactly what you saw. That's why I said, I've said it a few times, like, I don't think the sky is falling. I think there were plays to be made. I don't think it wasn't just like, I think you found a system where you ran into a buzzsaw, you ran into the defensive system that's built to stop the Dolphins, and McDermott was in his bag. And then you just kind of defensively, you had problems all throughout the game. You look up at halftime and it's 31-14 and you're like, well, crap, what are we going to do going forward? So I do think that there is something to say about that, but every game matters in the NFL. It's different than any other sport. Every week matters. And so I do think that these are good litmus tests for where you are. My biggest thing is, what do you do after a loss like this? Are we going to go on a run? Are we going to look, hungover the next week, especially against a Giants team that you should? Wink's going to blitz the absolute hell out of your offense, which means that you should be able to win one-on-one matchups. Tua is one of the best at getting the ball out quickly. Like, you should be winning that game easily. So to me, I want to see how they react against the Giants and then going into the Panthers. That will tell you more about this team than the loss to the Bills, if that makes sense.
Right. That's exactly where I'm at. I agree with that sentiment 1000%. To me, that's where I'm looking for. Like, you came out a little flat after, flying high, you're feeling good. You went into enemy territory and you got your face kicked in. And then now, like, is that going to be something that you allow to linger on, or are you just going to be able to, bounce back from it? And based on what I'm hearing, I think that we're going to be just fine. Like, I'm very confident on some of the things that I've heard. That the teams, they're focused, so it's good to hear, and I think they're going to be more than ready. I actually think this could be a pretty lopsided victory. But I don't want to take this team for granted, because I do think that they do have some things that they can take advantage of, especially with the mobile quarterback in Daniel Jones. I just wonder how well our linebackers will be able to contain him. What do you anticipate that maybe we do defensively this week against Daniel Jones to kind of contain him in that offense?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be making sure that the design quarterback runs are taken care of, that you don't let him get hot early. Don't let him get confidence early in the passing game. And then really focus on making sure that he doesn't hurt you with the legs. I think it's a good matchup to me personally. Just, I think that their personnel versus the Dolphins defense personnel. I mean, they don't have a dominant number one receiver. You should be able to cover them. I think that you hit the nail on the head, that this is a good game, the bounce back game. Make sure we're focused. Let's put things together. Let's put good tape on and start moving forward. Because again, in 2 weeks, you're going to have to play the Eagles, and that will be another good test for where this team is.
Oh, my phone. All right. Well, Cody, definitely thank you for your time. I'm not sure if anybody else has anything for Cody before he gets up out of here.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, Cody, and just one more time, just let everyone know where they can find you and your work. Cody has some great learning material as well. If you guys are interested in learning more about the scheme, Cody, I don't know if you want to just go ahead and just plug yourself real quick before you appreciate you.
Yeah, so you follow me on Twitter, but I also am on MatchQuarters at Substack. So if you have Substack app or matchquarters.substack.com, that's I put out a weekly newsletter on defense. It's basically the price for a month. It's you buy me a coffee a month and we're good. I've got several books on defense. You can find those on Amazon. Again, all of these links are there. You can go to matchquarters.com and see pretty much everything that I've ever written. Hit the archive button. You can go through and click on articles, whatever you have, an extensive amount of Fangio stuff on there. So any other kind of social, you can find me at MatchQuarters. Again, Twitter, it's different. It's at @the_coach_A. So you can just follow me on here and follow me along wherever you social. So I appreciate you guys having me on and let me talk about Fangio, which is one of my favorite things to talk about.
Appreciate you, Cody. Hopefully, the next time we have you on, we'll be able to rave about all the changes that were made.
Yeah, of course.
Appreciate you, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks for coming, Cody. Appreciate you.
All right, thanks, guys. Have a good day.
All right,
you have a good weekend.
You too.